start at the beginning, I guess. Ty was talking about, and Gary were talking about the Ace Record Exchange, and that brought back some memories. Because originally, I was this big Beatles freak, and I would go there to get like these Beatles bootlegs and stuff, and I saw all this other punk rock stuff, you know, the Sex Pistols. I'd heard a little bit about the Sex Pistols, but just kind of, like, should I buy one of those? You know, it's like, looks kind of interesting, so I did, and it's probably back in 1980, and I put it on the turntable, and I loved it. I remember, you know, seeing the VU meters just boom. It's like when I put on God Save the Queen, it's like, this is good stuff. So that's kind of what got me interested in punk rock originally, and then probably like in '82 maybe. I just by chance saw a flyer for some of those radio shows like Anarchy and Alternatives, and I saw the list of, they put like the playlist from the previous week, and it's like, wow, this looks like stuff I'd want to listen to, so I started listening to that. And, you were there at the November '82 Dead Bird Body show.
Yep.
Al took us there. We only got to see half of Dead Bird Body's set. We later became Dissonance, because the guy who drove us there had to get home or else. So, but just that half of a set was just so amazing.
Yeah, I really didn't know what to expect at the time, and that's more or less just through John is how I learned about the scene. And I remember he recorded the Anarchy show, and he had it on cassette, and I would listen to it, and the more I listened to it, the more I really, really enjoyed the music in it. And you know, at that time there was the media portrayal of punk rock as this, you know, horrible thing that, you know, people were
Quincy punks.
It's the Quincy punks where they're slashing each other up with razor blades and God knows what else. But he talked me into going, and I thought, you know, what the heck, let's go. And I think the thing that really impressed me was, like what Ty and Gary were talking about, is that the people were really, really cool. They were just as nice as you could be, and the music was really interesting. It was something that you just were not hearing on the radio at all. So yeah, I was really hooked pretty much from the get-go.
We listened to like that, Take No Prisoners, we listened to. And the thing is, you know, we're in Fenton, which is only 20 miles away, but we weren't really part of any scene. I mean, like me and my brother were the only two people at that time I know we even knew about this stuff. So, I mean, we didn't know Gary or anybody else in the Flint scene, you know, until that show. And then
I remember, I think Ty was there, and you know, we went to subsequent shows after that, and you got to see some of those same people that, like Ty and Ivan and Gary was there, and you got to know these people and know that hey, they're pretty cool people. And that kind of music was, like John said, in Fenton. If you weren't listening to Loverboy or Journey, it was
that was it. Foreigner 4. It's like, yeah, it was just, we were kind of off on our own, you know, doing our own thing. I mean, by the time we did our very first recordings, and you know, up in his bedroom, you know, it's just like in this cheap cassette deck. You know, we were pretty much incompetent, but we were having, we're very, we're even more incompetent though. Now we're experienced and incompetent.
Now we're incompetent.
We have an excuse
in denial.
But we admitted it then.
But I don't even remember. I think for me, Anarchy was the first show that we listened to, and I think as you listen to that, you realized, oh, there was another show called Take No Prisoners on right beforehand. And I don't remember, did Ben ask for local music, or did we just kind of take it upon ourselves to?
I think they would play like Dachau Club every once in a while. I think that was before we did our tape, and it was just kind of, I don't know if they might have asked for it, but you know, we did this tape and we didn't know what to do with it. There was no internet at the time. We couldn't, you know, put it online or anything, and it's like, what do we do with it now? So we just sent it to Ben and Jim at Take No Prisoners, and luckily they liked it, or unfortunately they liked it. I don't know which, but
yeah, I don't even.
He really liked it.
At the
I don't
time
know why.
when we first
listening back to it.
Yeah. Well, that tape, I think you had borrowed a bass guitar from Teresa Bigelow or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, the bass guitar. I always kind of had this thing where I thought it'd be kind of neat to learn how to play bass, and of course I didn't actually learn how to play it. I just started playing along and made as much noise as I could to make it sound like it went with it. But that's where it started, just in our bedroom, and John had a few lyrics that were just obnoxious as hell. The guitar was acoustic, and we sent it in, and they enjoyed it for whatever reason, and I just remember being totally floored
That they
hearing
liked
this noise that we made it on a cheap cassette deck coming out of our radio. It was just for me, it was just a real charge. It was like, wow, I can't believe this. It's actually on the air and people are listening to it.
Well, that leads me to ask you guys, like, I remember listening to their show, and, I mean, Ben would name drop you guys quite a bit. By this point, it was probably, I got back to Michigan in like '85, and I'm listening to the radio, and I don't know if it was an answering machine message or a tape. It was just this crappy, you were ganged around a little mic, and it was, hey, we're the guilty bystanders, and you're listening to Take No Prisoners. You know, I just like immediately, I was like, yeah, those guys are local, you know, that's not some band, you know, from somewhere.
Still aren't.
They're not a real
They're just some
band.
dudes. And so what was that? Was that just, after you guys sent a tape, did he ask you to do a bumper for the show or something?
We might have, because we dropped in a few times, he interviewed us a few times, they might have just asked us to do that. I don't even remember doing that.
That was the first time I heard of you guys, and before even a note of music, I was just like, what is this? This sounds like crap. But
That's
got
like
me
the first
hooked.
time
Then he heard the music.
That's like the first time I saw you guys at Wild Bill's show. I remember just going in and I thought, well, you know, they're having a punk rock show. This is gonna be so cool. First punk rock show. And I go in and I did one look at you guys. I thought, fuck this. And I was like, look at this guy. You know, they look like, you know, these college preppies. You know, and little did I know how bad I would curse myself. You know?
Karma.
Yeah.
Karma got you.
Guilty Bystanders have always been the anti-punk rock band in Flint. The clean cut, well, at least in the early days.
Well, that's the funny thing, because I remember, her name was Natalie, I forget her last name, but she took like pictures, just from Ann Arbor, took pictures of a lot of the punk bands. And there's like all these, you know, really, you know, tough looking guys in leather and mohawks and stuff. And then we got to our pictures where we were all smiling and had balloons on our instruments. So I guess we didn't quite, even in the misfits, we were misfits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really did feel musically that we were always kind of outside the mainstream, I guess, of the Flint punk scene. We had no background in that kind of music other than just what we listened to on Anarchy. And for me, my own musical limitations, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I knew a few chords on guitar, and I don't even think we knew bar chords at the time, so everything had kind of this jangly pop kind of a sound to it. But we were just having fun. It was
Yeah, never took yourself seriously, you know, like, the one I always think of is, if it's okay with my mom, going through, you know, I'm gonna kill these people, and plunge a drill bit between their eyes, and then say, well, if it's okay with my mom, you know, you gotta ask permission to be a punk.
And that's what it's really all about, is like, there doesn't have to be, you know, any musical similarities between what you guys were doing and what other bands were doing. That's, you know,
Well,
that's
that
like
was-
the ethic of punk rock. you
right,
know,
and I think that was really true for the Flint scene, is that, you know, because the people were all so cool, I think you could go up on stage and make just about any noise that you wanted, as long as it was something that you enjoyed and was original, something that they
Yeah.
hadn't heard a million times. They were gonna be into it, or at least, you know, some.
At
portion
least
of them
not
would be.
hostile.
Yeah,
It was
exactly,
like-
they weren't gonna like throw you out. I do remember we did a Poison cover one time, and I think the entire audience left. It was like, come back, it was a joke, really, it was, but.
I mean, it's like, for me, punk has always been an attitude more than a musical style. You know, if I had to choose between seeing a band that played hardcore and a band that played polka, and the hardcore band was doing it for money, and the polka band really believed in polka and was really into it, I'd go see the
Yeah.
polka band anyway.
Yeah, you know, you can tell when somebody has the passion to be doing it, that passion shows through in any genre, you know, any styles that, you know, I always said, yeah, Frank Sinatra's a great singer, but, you know, give me like a Doc Dart over a Frank Sinatra any day, you know? I mean, somebody that's
Yeah, and I think,
actually feels what they're saying.
speaking of Dr. Art, that was probably the show that really probably turned me on to the scene more than any other, was
909 Detroit
house show
Street.
at 909
Oh,
Detroit Street.
man.
Probably to this day still the best show that I ever saw.
I concur,
I
by
missed
far.
I'm saying
I mean, 'cause imagine seeing the Crucifix in their prime in a living room.
Yes.
That, it's just amazing.
I will never forget that. The drummer at that time, he went on to join Sonic Youth, but he was just, the whole band musically was just phenomenal. Doc Dart was just, you know, in top shape. He was just wild and unpredictable and vocally just all over the map. And it was just, I remember that show always will stick with me as being just, you know, that's what I would like to aspire to be in a band, is just to be able to create that kind of excitement. I'm sure we never came close, but,
That was just amazing.
yeah, from that point on, I was all about the scene. It was, just something that, like I say, I'll just never forget it.
What year was that?
80, that was right after our first show. So it was probably March of '83, I think. It's, I think, a week after our very first show.
And I think that's where we actually met, John
Jim
Hamper and
McDonald.
Jim McDonald
Yeah.
in person. You listened to the show all the time at that point, and you heard somebody having a conversation, it's like, hey, I know that voice, that's
Yeah,
Jim
I've heard
McDonald.
that guy,
So that's where we actually got to meet those guys. It really kind of solidified a lot of the connections with the people that would go to the shows, and with Ben and Jim in particular.
I think it's the first time we actually said hi to Ty and stuff, so. I remember him mentioning that Steve Newland's guitar had Gibson written in crayon on it, and that stuff. We couldn't afford real instruments back then.
Yeah, I remember our first show, we didn't even have amplifiers. I had a bass guitar that was a generic
Cost
thing.
$90.
Cost me $90 at the time.
Worth every penny.
And your second show, some audience members smashed Steve Newland's guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
While he was playing it.
right. The drummers, I mean,
Yeah,
and
Drummers
well,
are like the rings in a tree.
absolutely.
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I remember the Steve Newland years, you know, when it was just the original, well, I don't know if you can really even say the original four members, but when it was Steve, John, Steve Newland, and Classic Dave. You know, that's like the classic lineup. And I don't think it ever got any better than that. And we've seen, you know, peaks and valleys where we've had certain times where it's like, oh, this is our comeback, you know, and you ride the wave and then you're down on the bottom again, and, you know, it's like, well, maybe we should get a show going, and, you know, 4 people show up, but then you kind of build up momentum again, and, but yeah, I think for the most part, it's drummers, you know, the Andy era. You know, everybody always talks about the Andy era when it was kind of, you know, REM was the big thing. It was more, I'd say, like college music type stuff, you know. But and then there's the Paul era and the Fido era, you know. And at one time, Steve Newland came back after I joined the band, and that was when Bruce was.
Yeah, Bruce was drummer. Actually, John was the original drummer. He used to just play, it was just the 3 of us, John, I, and Steve Newland, and we'd play at Steve Newland's house. And John would play a snare drum, I was on bass, and Steve was on guitar, and we would do a lot of recording right into his stereo, just a couple of mics, if that, and stuck in the middle of the room, and that's what we would put together and send to Take No Prisoners, and they, you know, more often than not would play it. It was kind of funny that we could make whatever noise we wanted, and it'd be
For
on
some
the
reason they
radio.
liked it, yeah, I
So-
don't know.
It was that irreverent wit.
Well,
Don't
it's
let
funny.
them kid you.
It's funny that you know, you were ambitious enough to do that, but this whole band has always lacked ambition to, like, you know, we've never done it, we've never said, you know, we're gonna go out, we're gonna take the world by storm, anything like that. It just was like, you know, you wanna play a show? Yeah, well, you know, Joel's got our name on a flyer, I guess we're playing this show, you know, so we'd show up.
That's very true. I mean,
But-
there were a lot of shows where we'd be walking around, John and I were both students at U of M Flint, and Gary was there at the time, and we'd be walking around and we'd see a flyer on the wall and be like, oh, Guilty Bystanders are playing, you know, a week
Guess
from
we should
Friday.
show up.
I guess that means we're gonna be there,
That,
so.
yeah, that literally has happened more than once, where back then, they just, like, our name was on a flyer, so we showed up.
I was gonna say, you were talking about drummers. For those who don't know, I'm these clowns' younger brother.
Yes.
He's
10 years younger.
10 years older and 12 years older, but I'm when they started, I was kind of 7. So I remember Steve Newland brought this toy drum set. I don't know if it was from Toys R Us, but we didn't have any drumsticks, so we had a wood burning stove, and we tried to find some sticks that were somewhat drumstick width. So we're sitting there pounding it. But I remember I ended up breaking all the heads on it, and I was like, oh crap, and I was all scared, like, who's... So it was Steve Newland's drum set, but he's like, that kid's gonna beat the crap out of you. But it was his, I didn't know. It was fun. But I've always grew up with listening to them. I can't really say it was part of any scene. I just it was kinda like, well, I graduated from high school and Bruce Watson was out, and I don't know if he left or whatever, but it was like, hey Paul, you play drums for us? So, which I did. And I knew all the songs basically, cause I grew up listening to them. It was just a matter of me polishing up my drum.
Yeah. He really sucked in the beginning, but it was a quick study. I mean, 2 weeks in, he was like, tripled his drumming abilities, as I remember.
If we would've got together in the first place, yeah.
Yeah, I would say
That's the
that.
thing, would we have gotten together in the
I don't
first place?
think we would have ever gotten together, because my musical taste at that time, he was into the Beatles, I was into Electric Light Orchestra or something at the time, I mean, my God. And,
Brian Eno and all that stuff.
yeah, it probably would have never happened. And I think it really just boiled down to him bringing home that set list for Anarchy and getting exposed to that, that is what we had in common, that we both, was like, wow, this is really kind of cool.
I think once we were together, then we probably would have, but I don't think we would have got together in the first place.
No.
That's the thing. Cause I would have known what he was into, and, he would have known what I was into, and like I said, there's no internet, there's no, in Fenton, he just, was word of mouth. We heard about Steve Newland through a mutual friend. It's like, oh yeah, he listens to that kind of crap, so figure, well, I wanna meet this guy, he's got Black Flag's album and Flipper's album. You couldn't buy those things in Fenton.
Yeah.
There's no place you can get them.
And nobody in Fenton, other than probably Steve Newland and ourselves, even know who a Black Flag or a Flipper was, and if they did, it was just like, oh, that's that gay punk crap.
Yeah.
You guys gotta listen to some manly music like Loverboy or something.
Yeah.
Well, I hate all these guys.
Yeah.
Well, I think actually,
It was
our own
the opposite.
aptitude kind of prevented that from happening, because, if there was another musical style or taste that we were gonna play, we were unable to do it.
Well, seriously, Shithead was our first song, and it was supposed to be modeled after or influenced by PIL's second album, and we were so inept it turned into a country song, because we didn't know what the fuck we were doing.
Yeah, really, and so it was just kind of a, throw it out there and see what happens, as far as, and just however it turned out is how it turned out. I think it was probably years before we had enough chops to say, okay, well, let's try to do it in a different style, and then that was probably our biggest downfall, is we were, I think our limitations musically was probably one of our biggest assets at the beginning, just because what we did was very simple, and it kind of forced you to do a lot of things that.
I think we were too accommodating, really, because when Andy was in the band, he wanted to go in this other direction, and rather than have it come to a head, we kind of tried to accommodate everyone. It's like, somebody would write a more punk sound, and Andy would do like some thing with a synthesizer about Carl Sagan. We tried to have this attitude, let 100 flowers bloom, and and try everything, and really we just lost focus, I think.
But also in the context of the time, if you didn't have that drummer, you would not have had a drummer.
Yeah,
Right,
true.
right, yeah, and
So
I can't remember, we tried to count the number of drummers we had throughout our career. and
Yeah, it was
I-
always a problem having them. Now there's 3 guys.
yeah, at our
that all wanna
25th
drum.
anniversary show, there
Yeah.
were 3 people drumming for us. We never had this problem before.
Bigger than 38 Special.
Yeah.
Yeah, 39 special.
Yeah.
And that actually was a pretty big,
Influence on our careers, that 38 Special album?
that too.
Yeah, we're Wild-Eyed Southern Boys.
But that was actually a big impediment for us at the very beginning, was finding a drummer. We had this mutual friend, Dave Bozak, that I just happened to know knew how to play drums. I think his experience was, doing Led Zeppelin covers and stuff like that. But he was just Van Halen, and he was a really laid-back kind of guy who would just do whatever. And I remember the first time he played with us, he seemed like he was having a great old time, and was just laughing his ass off at our ineptitude, but he fit the band and the whole attitude that we just really don't care. It was just having fun. And then he joined the military and.
Kinda had to,
Yeah.
he was
Yeah,
starving
he was-
to death.
Yeah.
I mean, cause we played the show in Grand Rapids, and he hadn't eaten in like 2 days or something, so we like bought him a pizza sub, and he just devoured it, you know, and it's like, man. But he was like literally, for a while there, you know, he was living in Lansing, we kinda picked him up on the way out to Grand Rapids, he was almost like starving, so, you know, he kinda had to join the military just to, you know, have food.
I love how Dave Oss used to cram his drums into that Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
That was fun.
But I think that him joining the band is what kind of made us a band per se, because we were always just, you know, making goofy tapes in our bedrooms or, you know, in Steve's
We
basement.
couldn't really play live until we got him anyway.
Right, and that was the genesis, I think, of us actually playing a show was when Dave joined us.
So he was in the band until he joined the military, and then, is that what Dave?
No,
Grave came in, or-
no, Dave Grave came in, like, you know, classic Dave was casual about everything, including practices and
Showing
shows.
up and,
Yeah, so he wouldn't show up, and we just figured we gotta get somebody more, you know, more reliable, and Dave Grave was, until, his unfortunate, brush with law enforcement.
That's pretty scary to think
Yeah,
about.
but
you
then,
know.
classic Dave came back for a while till mid-86, and then he had to join the Navy. Then we got, that's when we got, Andy.
Andy played for a while, and
And the first show
But I
he
came
played
in
with us.
after, that's about the point I came in.
yeah, that's when Steve joined the band.
The first show with Andy, I think, was when we played at WIDR in Kalamazoo, the radio station. That was that was a funny show because, you know, the guy at the radio station wanted us to do a sound check song before they actually went live on the air with us. So we did like one of our really obnoxious shows, songs with lots of swear words in it. And he was just like, "You're not gonna do stuff like that on the air, are you?" It's like, but we just wanted to freak him out.
Is there swear words in some of our songs?
Yeah, fuck yeah. No, they don't care.
No.
I was gonna say, well, I just moved into Clio earlier last year in March, and for my birthday, which is in the end of April, I invited, you know, all these guys, or most of them anyway, and we just had a jam, all day. So I guess, other than that, I mean, it's always just kind of been the brothers and their friends and.
I really enjoyed that show because I'd always wanted, you know, before, you know, we stopped playing, I always wanted my kids to see us play live. And they did, and they stayed for one song, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, all right. We wanna go play in the treehouse.
Yeah.
So they weren't real
Treehouse.
impressed.
We're no Barney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
So
our
we
dad-
rate it as like treehouse, guilty bystanders.
Yeah, as far as our family, our dad really couldn't have given a crap less about anything that we were doing. I think one time he actually did hear us play, somehow we got booked to play the Fenton Gazebo. And that was pretty much a disaster, because in Fenton, you're just not gonna go over very well if you're not playing bluegrass or something.
folk.
Steve's guitar.
You have a big Confederate flag behind you or something.
And I remember all these, you know, old people would show up, and you could tell they were
Just
looking
staring at
for,
us.
you know, some kind of bluegrass or country music, and here we are playing, I don't even know what we were playing at the time, but I just remember getting a lot of shocked looks on people's faces, and the place clearing out rather quickly.
I stayed.
Yeah, it was funny, the audience was like half, we had a few like people from the scene show up, and then the rest were all these, you know, really old people waiting for bluegrass, so it was one of our weirdest shows.
Hey, Steve ended up playing most of that on an acoustic.
Yes, he broke a string and pulled out his acoustic.
Practically in what, your backyard where you grew
Yes.
up?
We literally can see our backyard from the gazebo.
Yeah.
The place we could see the house where we recorded our original stuff from the gazebo. Probably,
You know,
probably
kinda
mixed
one-
it up.
Didn't you guys do Fire though too, the Hendrix's Fire?
Yeah, I remember
Steve
Steve
played
doing
on
a
acoustic.
fire solo, Jimi Hendrix solo on an acoustic guitar.
But it was just distorted.
Yeah, he
acoustic.
had a pickup on it and cranked up the distortion, so you really couldn't tell it was acoustic. Yeah, we did some of it, like you said, the Grandma's Eyes, that kind of stuff. That was when Andy was with us, and we were doing the REM-esque kind of songs. As a matter of fact, I think we did an REM cover. I think we did Catapult.
Yeah.
Johnny be good, because we figured, well, if we're gonna be playing in a public place, maybe we should do some covers. Didn't really help us any. But yeah, it was very memorable. Yeah, I think that was probably the only time my dad actually saw us play, and I'm sure he was totally thoroughly disgusted with it. My mom always just kind of was, you know, whatever you guys do, that's just fine with me.
She's bemused by the whole thing. I mean, like, you know, if there's like an article in the paper and she sees her pictures, she thinks it's pretty neat. But, I don't think she's gonna listen to our CD or anything.
Beyond that, no, not really. It's just not a big topic of discussion at family reunions. My wife hates the band, so, and my young son is 4 years old and has not really been exposed to it yet, so.
And if you do expose them to it, you probably get some chance.
Yeah, I played another band called Filthy Clean right now, and I remember he came to see us play and immediately covered his ears and wanted to go home, so, yes.
I did that too when I saw you guys play.
I don't blame you.
Would now be a good time to mention, since we're on the gazebo, the Cognito show?
Oh, that was, they had an influence on us. It's like we had influences. We had like positive influences, like, you know, the Sex Pistols, Dead Kennedys, seeing Generic Society play at the Armory. That was one of our first shows. We really loved that. And seeing them again, you know, getting to play with them at Wild Bill's was great. But there's also like negative influences, like Foreigner 4. That was getting played everywhere. And then another negative influence locally was a band called Cognito. And they played, I wrote about it in my little scribblings, but I described them as playing mostly covers with a few original songs that may as well have been covers. And their stage attitude was just like, they thought they were gonna be the greatest band in the universe, and they kept telling the audience that constantly.
Yes.
It's like, this song was called Big Time, and we'll be there soon, you know, it's like they just thought they were the greatest thing in the frickin' universe. And ever since then, that turned me off so much that whenever we play, it's like, you know, I'm slagging on the band. It got to the point where, you know, Andy's like, why do you keep putting us down so much? It's like, because I don't give a shit. You know, it's like, we suck, and I don't care if we suck, we're having fun.
Right. Actually, I think that was a huge influence on our attitude, was that, oh my God, look at those guys, that's what we don't want to do.
Yeah, we don't want that to happen to us, because that's just so fucking obnoxious.
Yeah, I mean, if you come to a show and we suck, well, we did our
suck,
job,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah,
I'm glad you came.
you were
but-
forewarned.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Depends on when it would have happened. If it would have happened before I had a full-time job, maybe I would have considered it. I mean, you know, after I had a job though, it's like they'd have to offer me a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing, you know, after I joined the band, Andy was always on this thing about, well, I got these guys, they want us to tour with them, and I told him, great, you know, as long as it pays my bills, you know,
Yeah.
as long as I can afford to quit my job and pay my bills, I'm fine. Well, I can't guarantee that. Well, you know, what do? At that point in your life, you're just kind of coming into your adulthood where you're getting more and more responsibility. You know, I think, well, you were pretty much married by that point.
yeah, I think our ambition was never a strong point for the band.
Yeah.
Just the fact that we played shows was probably about as much as you were gonna get out of us, because we're frankly lazy.
Yeah. Well, if somebody was gonna offer us a ton of money, then we'd take it,
Yeah.
sure, but, you know, that's not why we're
One
into it.
Google dollars.
Yeah.
This has just been a hobby all my life.
Right,
I've been
and
in a
that's
bunch
the
of
way I've
bands,
always
and
looked at it. It's a
Yeah.
hobby.
My
Actually-
father also went every Thursday night, he'd go bowling, or every Friday night he'd go golfing, and I get
And
together with
that's-
the band and play.
That's much better on your mental health, you know, I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
because
Going into like
everything,
Kurt Cobain.
it's just a hobby, but you know, I mean, we've all, you know, done some cool things musically, and, you know, that's like
Except me,
icing
I
on the
haven't done
cake,
anything
you know?
Yeah.
musically yet, but.
Actually, for me personally, there was only one time that I regretted that we never got huge. And that was, let's see, when was it, 2003, when we were doing a benefit show for Bruce Dedrin. I wish we could have
Yes.
fucking, you know, filled the Silverdome.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Bruce was my second cousin. Our second cousin. I worked with him at WFPE. It was actually kind of coincidental that I ended up working at WFPE. I was student at U of M Flint at the time. I was a communications major. I was also broke, and they said, well, we can get you a job at WFE. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. I know a couple of guys that have a radio show over there, and then it turns out that soon after that, I did some engineering for Ben and Jim, but I also met Bruce Stedron there, and I had known him from playing with, I think, Anaquoke Chamber Orchestra.
Oh, yeah, interesting band.
And so he was actually kind of part of the scene, so it was really a total coincidence that I got to meet him. And I think it was a conversation I was having with my mom, and I told her about this guy, Bruce Stedron, I was working
Oh,
with.
you
And
were
she's like,
related.
oh, did you know he's your second cousin?
Yeah,
I'm like, oh.
we knew him before we knew we were related.
No. So, yeah, we found out we were related.
Yeah.
He did a lot of engineering for the Guilty Bystanders. We spent a lot of time at WFB recording.
He played keyboards for you, didn't he, for a short?
For a brief period, it
Yeah.
just, yeah. The thing is, like, the way we wrote the songs, it didn't really, if we would've wrote them with keyboards
Right.
in the songwriting process, I think it would've worked better, but, you know, that's the thing, I just regretted that we couldn't have, you know, got thousands of people there and made tons of money for them, but, you know. All the rest of the time, I didn't care.
Favorite
We played
shows?
shows where we outnumbered the audience, so.
Yeah.
Favorite shows, worst shows?
I was just gonna say, well, just for me, like, I didn't join these guys until '93. Like I was saying, I just got out of high school, and the very first show I ever played was at the actual Capitol Theater. I thought that was so cool, and I never played in front of anyone, and here I am at this big old theater. Acoustics are really awesome. So.
My favorite show will be the next one.
Mine was the first one, the first time I saw you guys, and that was the first hall show I saw. It was the first awareness I had of any of the scene. I'm somebody that, you know, I mean, when I was asked to play with the Guilties, I don't know, starstruck might be too strong a word, but it was like, oh wow, really? Wow, because it like really, you guys meant something to me. But oddly enough, I don't remember the specifics of the first. The only reason I remember the first show I played is because I have it on tape, and I go back and listen to it. I go, that wasn't a bad show, but it wasn't like, you know, my first show with the Guilties wasn't. I was underwhelmed. You know, I probably sort of built it up in my mind before we did it, but it was all right.
Yeah, you
Didn't suck
soon
too
experienced
bad.
the disappointment of being a member of the band.
Yeah.
You brought your musical
Yeah,
standards down. I really enjoyed the first show we played at Wild Bill's with Generic Society, because, you know, it was the first time we got to meet them, meet John and Gary Mueller, and, you know, I was really nervous at first, because, you know, you guys have been playing for, you know, years, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So just the fact that you didn't tell us to fuck off and die was a positive thing.
I had ear-to-ear grin the whole night when you guys were playing. That was some funny stuff.
Yeah, I just remember being really intimidated, you know, watching Generic Society and Gary's playing bass. I was like, damn, he knows how to play his instrument. You know, he's gonna look at me and say, oh my God, he's horrible, but he was always nice about it, so that was always a positive thing as far as Gary was concerned.
And seeing Generic Society, they remember all the lyrics. And they can hit the right notes,
I wouldn't go that far.
more than we ever did, more than me.
But yeah,
I
you guys were always
forget the notes.
polished and practiced, and everything was pulled off seemingly without a hitch, while our shows were always, our hallmark was screwed up, you know, playing wrong chords, and like John says, forgetting lyrics, I'd forget bass lines right in the middle of the song.
Well, you guys had the time wouldn't even show up with a set list, and, you know, hope that
Actually,
your
some of
fans
those-
would shout out
Yeah,
the song.
well, actually, those are some of the best sets we ever did, where
Well,
we
the
didn't
best
have
set that
a-
we ever did was that one that my
a
dog,
hand,
Yeah.
chose.
Yeah, we had this, we just laid out like all the songs
Songs
on
and
this
whatever
big
she
sheet,
stepped on.
and
we
his
wrote
dog
down.
would just put a paw on something, and we just wrote it down, and that was one of the best shows we ever did.
I'd have to say, one of my favorite shows was at the East Sider, when we did the 3 sets.
Oh,
We
yeah.
did all the early stuff in the first set, all the more recent stuff in the second set, and all covers in the third set.
Huh.
It
I
was just,
forgot about that.
And they wanted us to play even longer.
yeah.
It's like, put a pitcher of beer, it's like, here, you know, this will make you play longer.
Drink this. I I'm with you, man, IPS.
I'd bring our first CD, I think.
That's a tough one. I probably wouldn't, but,
Well, yeah.
The next one.
Luckily, this is hypothetical.
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm partial to the last one.
Another happy,
Another
yeah,
Happy
another
Sunshine Day.
Sunshine Happy
I think the
Days,
flow
my
of it's
favorite.
pretty good, and I like the, the songs that are on it. So, but I like Broccoli Rules too, it just brings back
Yeah, I think for me,
Takes
the
me
early
back to
stuff,
special
even though the
days.
sound quality is just abysmal, it reminds me of the fun that we had.
Yeah, that's true.
And the singing and all the people, it was just a good time.
But we probably wouldn't bring it, that's the thing.
Yeah.
We'd wanna
Yeah.
listen to somebody else.
Mm.
We already know what we sound like.
John would take 4 and a 4.
Damn right.
Mhm. You
And
know,
Steve
those
would take
Cognito
yellow
chips.
out of it.
That's right.
Yeah, cause, well, let's see, John and I still play in a band together, other than the Guilties.
Are we a band?
Yeah.
I think we always will be until,
So one of us dies or all of us
Yeah.
Usually
die.
it's Joel that puts us on
None of us
flyer
are going
when she
anywhere,
wears.
so every once in a while we'll get together, I don't know.
And Fido and I play.
I don't think I've been
in another
kicked
band,
out
too, so-
unless, nobody told me.
Yeah,
Well,
the
you
thing,
quit.
like you mentioned earlier, the
Yeah.
thing that'd be alarming with Joel is, like a, sort of a psychic foreboding thing. You see a flyer with like your funeral on it.
I'm gonna have to die.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'll be the memorial show, it's like,
My death is
whoa.
finally booked.
I guess I better die then.
So you hear that, Joel? You have to put us on a flyer if you want us to play again.
Yeah.
Well, it's always worked in the past.
Well, I just remember, I practice on my birthday.
Mm.
We show up at Gary's, and John shows up and he goes, well, I guess this is as good a time as any to let you guys know I'm done playing. And I'm like, well, happy fucking birthday to me. you know? And that was pretty much it, and I don't know exactly what the circumstances were behind it, but it was his decision, and
Children, wasn't it?
It was just, kids and
Life.
married, being
Yeah.
married and a job and, the job was going like really, basically it was just trying to put too much stuff into too little time and that was like the one thing I could give up without, ending up broke, so, I couldn't really toss the kids out in the street and I, had to kinda keep working, so it was just, I figured it'd be better if I just, flat out just left than to kinda, keep going half-assed through it, and not really, I couldn't really put that much extra time into it. is what it
And we
came down
interviewed
to.
all the great singers, Sammy Hagar, Ronnie
That's the thing,
James
yeah.
Dio.
Mike Reno.
But I told him, if
Kelly
you wanna
Cronin.
get another singer, I was totally cool with it, so,
All the replacements.
I think, I had my period where I had quit the band for more or less the same sort of reasons. I had a wife that was demanding a lot of my time and I quit and almost immediately regretted it every minute. They had Lee Conquest playing bass and he was always a hell of a lot better than I was, and that just kinda made me mad. But I missed it.
Well, it's
Really
classical
just-
training at Interlock.
Exactly.
And I tried quitting a couple months ago, but I
But-
said play the show instead.
Pull me back in.
But then I found out that Lee was, I think I even told John, I said, if something ever happens to Lee, if he slips on a banana peel or something, I'm ready to rejoin, but, I guess he had some medical issues and so, it was lucky for me, unfortunate for him, but, I was glad to come back.
I like how it is now, cause it's like every so often we'll kinda get together and do a show here or there, and it's not taken up, and now we kinda realize, we all got, a lot of us are married and have kids, and,
Not me.
and, not you, but you still have other things going on, and
I'm still a
it's-
band whore.
Yeah, so, I just like, getting together every so often and just kinda playing when we do, and it's not like any big deal if nobody, somebody can't make the practice, it's no big deal.
And as the years go on, it's like, well, we've done it this long, let's see if we can make it to 30 years, and then,
Yeah.
who knows, we'll be playing at the senior center.
Yeah.
The audience definitely is downsized. shall we say.
Matlock!
Right now, jeez. I listen to
Mine,
podcasts.
I'm like Ty, mine varies,
Yeah,
I'll go anything from, well, I listen to a lot of Mozart because I went to school with him, but. No, it just runs depends on what mood I'm in that day. I've got a collection of about 900 CDs and whatever I grab that day. I'm trying to think of what's in my car right now. Do you remember what's in my car?
Yeah,
That's another thing, the memories get intense as you get older.
Actually,
Oh, the
I don't know
gun
if I
club,
should,
I have the gun club in my car right now,
I
so.
don't know if I should out myself. I listen to ABBA a lot. And always
that's
have.
cool.
That's the thing, there's a lot of, I don't know if it's Arrested Development on my part or whatever, but
It is.
I still, I listen to the same crap that I pretty much always listen to, which is everything,
Yeah, I mean, I'm into like all kinds of crap. It's like I'm really into Gordon Lightfoot of all things.
Gord's gold, man, you gotta
Yeah,
have it.
so, and then just as far as the rock stuff, it's just whatever, I like a lot of, every once in a while I feel like getting out the old Minor Threat EP or
Yeah,
something.
well, it's like you were asking those guys earlier, do you listen to the old punk stuff? Yeah, I still pull out my Black Flag, Crucifix, pretty much that whole era. It just, the older you get, the more it takes you back,
Yeah,
and
it
the more
puts you in a
younger it
good
makes you
mood,
feel.
So mostly older stuff, not necessarily stuff that's coming
I
out
don't know, I
new.
mean,
There's some newer stuff,
It's hard, there's so much music, it's hard to keep up. Somebody will get, like, Eagles of Death Metal, I got the new Eagles of Death Metal CD and I'm digging on that, but there's just so much stuff, Fleet Foxes, there's just a ton of, you can't keep up. Field Music's another good band, just whatever
I think with
somebody
the
says,
knowledge of
check
the
it out.
internet, there's just so much stuff. I mean, people are putting out their own stuff left
Yeah.
and right, and it's so hard to keep track of it all. I can tell you that pretty much anything that you can hear on the radio today is something that I'm not gonna listen to. Ben Hamper used to send me CDs of some new, like, power jangle pop stuff. that
Great stuff.
is really fantastic, and I'm really into that kind of stuff right
The
now.
radio will never touch it.
But yeah, you won't hear on the radio, but yet it's, melodic and hooky, and it's something you'll never hear on the radio.
Well, it used to be back in the day, you'd have, one or two records come out a week, and that's, dates me right there saying records, but now, what is there, 40, 50 of them come out every week, every Joe Blow in the universe has a band now, and,
It's hard to keep up.
it's got, technology's gotten to the point where, like they said, you can put out the stuff yourself and just sell it online, so.
He still wants to fuck Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah, right.
Here at
That's the thing
Sunsville,
is-
my personal
Yeah.
life.
I wouldn't say it so much reflects, but it's definitely influenced by things in your
Yeah.
life.
I mean, just like, bringing up I Wanna Fuck Miss Pac-Man, that was, influenced by, I saw some guy playing a video game at some theater lobby, and he was,
Literally, like, humping the machine.
it looked like he was humping the machine, and it's just like, the light bulb went off. And so it's just like stuff you see, stuff that you experience. Speaking of Dylan, I think some of the stuff he's doing now is as good, if not better, than what he's ever done. It's just, his voice is a bit worse for wear, but, I think it's great. So I'm hoping I can still do stuff creatively, one form or another, as long as I'm alive, but, it's kinda hard to say that it's totally fictional. It's like, you have to be influenced by things, so, if you're not, then kinda what's the point of being around?
John's wrote probably, 95% of the lyrics to all the songs, but I've had my few contributions, but, yeah, usually they, if they're not just totally dumbass like Acid Rain, but, like, a song like Unique was very much, I remember playing a show, I think it was at the Shoebox or something like that, and Joel Rash said, some guy was, panning on what I was wearing, and that was the whole thing, is the punk scene was you can kinda just dress however and do whatever, and I had found some old bell-bottom corduroys at a flea market or something. I was just wearing some really outlandish crap that wasn't, a leather jacket, and I, had just a regular haircut. It wasn't like a mohawk, and Joel told me that he was just ripping on me, and at the same time, one of his favorite bands that he liked was the Guilty Bystanders, and he's like, you didn't even know that you were in the band. And that's where the song Unique came from. Just that whole situation.
How about the longevity story about Unique?
Oh, yeah, I don't know, who was the band?
I don't remember who the band was. We were playing at the first local, And we opened the show and we're playing Unique, and Joel comes up and says, hey, these kids in this other band are upset because you ripped
stole
off
their
their cover song.
Yeah.
Joel says, you fucking idiot, they wrote the song. We've been around so long, somebody else covered it, and then they heard that song and they covered it.
Was
That's
it the Row or
beautiful.
something?
That's beautiful.
But yeah, they must have heard the Rose tape and covered it themselves.
We haven't written any since,
Well,
we wrote one,
yeah.
Silver.
So usually
Drums to
somebody,
this.
you know, a lot of times it's just somebody might have a
Exactly.
German for an idea and, we'll have like one part of a song just for guitar or just a bass line. And then, the other members will add something on top of that and so on and so on. If we get a chance, we'll throw it down on a tape, just get a mono tape of it, and John will sit down and write lyrics. Sometimes he'll come up with lyrics right as we're, trying to figure out what it is we're playing exactly, so. I think it just varies.
Yeah, and sometimes John will come in with
With
the
a full
complete
song,
song,
yeah.
Chord
And
progressions.
then when these
and-
guys get through with it,
It's,
Yeah, we
And then
tend
it's
to
as
shape it a
Paul
little
says,
bit.
put drums to this.
yeah. It's funny, cause mentioning, coming in with a complete song, the guy had a song called Lysergic Acidathlomide, and it was originally like almost a ballad. And by the time these guys got done with it, it was like this, rocking out thing with, guitar solos and everything, so. But that's the cool thing about it is, by the time there's all this give and take with the band, and those bouncing ideas around, it ends up something totally different than what it originally was, but a lot of times, most of the time, it's better.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I always enjoyed, especially in the early days, when I would come to practice and I would have, some lyrics and a tune put together. It never, ever turned out anything like I envisioned, but that was the fun part, was just, okay, let's throw it in the band and see what comes out. And just, that was its own enjoyable aspect.
It's
of
like
it.
creating your own mutant.
Yeah, exactly, you just had no idea how it was gonna turn out, but usually it was something you were happy with.
Guilty Bystander is a totally democratic process, or are there leaders among you?
It's more like an apathetic
Yeah.
process.
No, it's
Nobody ever makes any decisions really,
More like a big amoeba.
yeah,
Yeah.
we just kind of morph around, and really, there's no leader at all. Maybe that's the problem, but,
We're-
No leader, no leadership.
yeah. It just kind of, we're a
I mean,
collective, I
it is
guess.
what it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you need a leader as much as you need a leader.
Or I'll just
No,
be
bunch of
too
type
mellow,
B
easy
people, man, we
going.
don't. Yeah, there's no type A's in the band at all.
No.
It's kind of like we're a building and everyone owns their own little office space. Come up with the lyrics, we'll do the bass, we'll do the guitar, and it's all come together with our parts. And there it is, you're done.
Closing comments or whatnot?
I wish you'd get out of here so we can start talking bad about him.
Okay.
Like we don't do that in front of you.
Well, now you did it. Now, there's this time that Gary,
Yeah.
closing comments, all I can say is it's been a hell of a fun quarter century. There was one thing I wanted to add, going back to what Gary and Ty were saying about the cops. I think there's only one time where the police ever closed down one of our shows that we were gonna play at, and that was at the Rankin Rental Hall. And they're just being jerks. We ended up playing at somebody's basement afterwards. And the Flint cops never really gave us any problem at all. There's only one time I ever remember seeing any Flint cops, and that was when we were playing at the Shoebox. Basement of Drew's Shoes back in '84, I think. These two policemen came in and were like shining flashlights around, and they just kind of looked like, what the hell? They just kind of shrugged their shoulders and left, and that was it. But Detroit was another thing. Oh man, Detroit was just, I swear this is true. I saw it with my own eyes in the street in front of the Greystone. There's these two punkers walking across the street to some restaurant across there. And these Detroit cops did a U-turn and tried to run them over. You could hear the accelerator going. They had to like dive out of the way to keep from getting, being roadkill. And another time after a show at the Greystone, Phil Hines from Dissonance was out there, and it was a really hot day, and he was like just exhausted and covered in sweat. And the Detroit cops, go in the alley behind there and just like, you know, was abusing the guy, you know, was like yelling out these obscenities at him. It's like, these are the cops, you know, it's like, who's gonna protect us from them?
Yeah.
But the Flint police never gave us any hassle.
I mean, it kinda goes back to what you were saying earlier about that hall show and just everybody, I mean, everybody just mellow, you know, I mean, not to be all hippy-dippy about it, but that really is the difference between the Flint scene and virtually every other scene I've even had a periphery on. And I don't know, it's like, it's kind of circular with the Guilties. It's like, you know, it's sort of, you know, one begets the other. I mean, we got it pretty good. Pretty good mentality where we're at.